One of the nicest things to come out of the more recent years are more compact emulation systems. Handhelds that work really well. There's a lot of them, and they're really nice. Only 90 kids will remember... Wait, strike that. Only kids from the 2000s will remember those crappy plug-and-play consoles. You know, the ones shaped like Pac-Man or a mini arcade cabinet. They only have like 1 or 2 games in them. Yeah, them things are awful. Trade up for something much bigger and filled with ROMs and games. Well, thank God those days are over, because huge companies have realized that they can make consoles with HDMI and load them up with a bunch of old games that people love. And wham bam, thank you ma'am, you gotcha for another $80, son. But what if you don't have 80 bones? And maybe you just want to take a console with you? Well, the BitBoy might just have you covered. But hang on a second, this is the second edition of the BitBoy, because I reviewed the first, and this one is definitely the one you'll want to buy. So we're going to take a look at this bad boy, or should I say, BitBoy, in today's video. We got a new BitBoy, boys! Nah, wait a minute, that's a bit redundant. We got a new BitBoys. That doesn't work. Look. We got a handheld that's Game Boy-esque. It looks really nice. It's an emulation station capable of emulating the NES, Game Boy games, and Game Boy Color games, all in the palm of your hand. I mean, it's pretty small, man. A lot of people are claiming that this thing is absolutely amazing because now it features support for an SD card, which, I mean, I guess you can load your own 100% legal ROMs onto it, if you can find them. Rip love ROMs! Rip many other ROM sites. Thanks, Nintendo! Point is, instead of being restricted to the NES only, or having something else, you can customize which games you want to go on it, as long as they're the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or the NES. A bit strange and limited, but a bit more than what normal systems have come out, where they only have like the NES or Sega Genesis on it. Being able to load your own ROMs onto the BitBoy is the biggest change, but there are other changes too. The screen has been altered slightly, and it looks really nice. It's an LCD, and the other output is an AV cable that plugs in right here, so you can plug and play on the TV with it. But most people would likely use this as a mobile device rather than playing it at home on TV. There's no pop-out controller, so you're just sitting there like this, and you know, so there you go. The shell itself is pretty light, but it's not cheap, so it's good. Feels nice. There is USB to charge, but not USB-C. You can stick headphones in here. That is, if you still have headphones with a physical jack. They're Apple users. But Proto, there are Android devices that are doing it too. Yeah, okay, it was just a joke, overzealous Apple user. Go pay another $1,000 for an iPhone X. Point is, if you have a headphone jack, you can plug it in here and you get better sound. But if you have headphones, it will attempt to emulate that mono sound in your headphones, and it sounds a lot better than just the bottom right speaker, in my own personal opinion. So that's why I bring it up. You ain't gonna be playing your favorite MP3s out of this bad boy. The controls work well enough for a compact mini Game Boy, even though they're pretty small and your hands are kind of cramped. The D-pad is okay, and by comparison to an NES controller, the D-pad is not bad at all. The start and select buttons are not pronounced. The A and B buttons are smooth, and they feel great to use, and there are also turbo buttons, which is important because a lot of NES games and Game Boy games also use the premise of pressing the button a lot, so turbo helps you out with that. Instead of just pressing a button a bunch of times, you just hold the button down and it presses it for you. So it's really nice. It saves on your thumb. But I would rather not have them at all and just have it built into software, because not every game's like that. So likely a lot of the time you're not going to be using the turbo buttons. So the final button on the front is the reset button, which resets you back to the menu and other things. It's used for quite a bit. At the top, we have buttons to turn on the device itself and the SD card slot, which is important because you're going to need to put your SD card in here, which, by the way, one of the biggest downfalls of this. But it does work. It's just difficult to get the SD card out once it's in. The sides are blank. There is no volume wheel. unlike the original Game Boy that did have a volume wheel and a connection out, so you have to use a button combination to adjust your volume. Now, let's turn this bad boy on and actually play some games, because that's what you're really here for. When you turn this on, nothing will happen unless you have an SD card in and some kind of ROMs loaded on it. The software used to actually boot the ROMs is okay, but the splash screen to boot any of the emulators is, it's really, really crappy. I mean, look at these, okay? Look at this. These scream cheap, crappy clone console. Look, literally fun is being yelled at me through the screen. It's so terrible looking, and it extends to the Game Boy and Game Boy Color as well. It's crazy. The full game titles are cut off though, so if you have long names or long file names, they'll be cut off. You can just change the name and orientation before loading them onto your SD card, so that'll just fix that problem. It's something that is fixable, which is very, very nice. Scrolling up and down can be sped up or slowed down, and if you use the left and right on the D-pad itself, it'll scroll high or lower in bulk. I want to start with the NES, and the games work fine. My personal ROMs ran acceptably for a preloaded system, though once again, with a laptop, customization would have been much better and easier to change settings, so for anyone looking to do that, again, that's something that you're going to have to keep in mind. Some of the games had issues with sound, screen, speed, and once I completely destroyed Zelda by loading a save state. I have no idea how I did this. It only happened once, randomly, and did not actually break the game itself besides just the graphics. So, interesting. I really wish I could have played through the game like this, but it did fix itself as soon as I left the stage. Yes, this also supports save states as well, which is an important part. Again, if it's an emulator, it really should be able to save your game, and it does. Anyways, the games work well enough, platformers do fine, and are acceptable in emulation department. I've tested multiple Mario games, played through multiple levels in each one of these games. RPGs work fine. Zelda 2, aside from that weird glitch, worked just fine. Racing games work fine as well, but when I loaded Mach Rider, the ROM that I have, the game was dumped improperly and in a corrupted state, therefore it does not run correctly. This means that the software running this has no correction to it, so if you get bad ROMs or bad games, they're going to run just like that. So be very, very aware of where you're getting your ROMs from, hence why you need to be very, very cautious of which ROMs you are going to actually download and get. And you should own a legal copy of the game, okay? How do you do that with NES games outside of eBay? Well, that's Nintendo for you. Okay, go buy an NES Classic and you won't feel so bad emulating Mario on here. The NES itself is passable, at least for mobile emulation. Moving on to the Game Boy itself, yeah, after multiple times of trying to get my Game Boy ROMs to work on this, and I do have plenty of them like Pokemon, I could only get a Japanese version of the Game Boy Color working, which turned out to be some Beast Wars game I never even knew existed. It was pretty awesome, to be honest, so I'm not really angry over this. It's likely just a formatting error, as I could also only get 4 Game Boy Color games to work, 2 of my favorites, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages. Again, not too upset about that. And from gameplay of said games, both the Game Boy emulators work just fine. I again have the Revo K101, so if I wanted to play those games, I'd just play it on this. It's not that big of a deal. And that is where I want to transition this video. As much as I want to give this a fair review, when I compared it to other comparable devices, the only thing that the BitBoy has going for it is that it's severely cheaper than other devices on the market. The Revo K101 costs more than double at the time of this recording and supports Game Boy Advance games as well as Game Boy games, and it has support for official cartridges, meaning you can actually put in the official game cartridge and play it in here. It's pretty awesome, but it's extremely expensive, and it does support unofficial cartridges too. Gee, I wonder what that means. Pokemon, all fairy, all safe forever. Classic remembrance. I guess this is pretty unofficial. The Revo K plays games smoothly, has a nice operating system to boot the ROMs, and the case itself works great. So do the controls and the buttons. It feels really good. It feels like a premium piece of hardware by comparison. Check out some of the games here. Some of the cleanest emulation I've seen for a clone console. But then again, it is double the price. However, it does not officially support the NES itself, meaning that the BitBoy has one up on the Revo K here. And the BitBoy does actually look like a Game Boy, so it has that going for it too. But the Revo K101 can play Game Boy Advance games and cartridges, which the BitBoy cannot, because there is no cartridge slot, so there's no support for that. So do you think it's worth paying the price of literally 2 BitBoys for one Revo K101 and sacrifice the NES for Game Boy Advance support? Or do you think you should save some cash and buy this Game Boy-esque emulation station? Full price BitBoy costs around $60, but currently is around $40. Plus the SD card you're going to need to load the ROMs, and that's going to be pretty cheap because you don't need a big SD card for NES, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color ROMs. They're pretty small. Even the full library itself would only consist of 1 gigabyte for all of the NES, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color games, and the site itself even provides its own items that you would need, except for the ability for me or the website to personally provide them to you or tell you how to get them. You'll have to figure that out yourself, and a smart person will be able to do that. Long story short, should you get the BitBoy over other things that are available to you? Competition. Should you hack a PSP? Should you buy a Revo K101? For $40, I can't say that I'm too upset with this, but for the simple fact that it has a few flaws in it, I wouldn't call it a perfect system. A cheap alternative? Absolutely. Out the box, this works just fine. You load ROMs onto it, it plays them, and it works. Acceptable is good, and that's what you want from a device like this. So for a cheap plug-and-play solution, I gotta tell you, it's not that bad. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. You let me know with a big thumbs up and tell me, are you interested in buying the BitBoy? I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can click that subscribe button to stay up to date with me. You can drop a comment, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this if you've tried it, and I've been your host, Protomario, and I'm signing out. As always, good gaming, God bless, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.